Hello, we are here on our second mission. Today we are going to talk about water. You are not sick, you are thirsty. Don't treat thirst with medications. Your body's many cries for water. All right, so chronic cellular dehydration painfully and prematurely kills. Its initial outward manifestations have until now been labeled as diseases of unknown origin. One of the most obvious reasons why medication has become so complicated and costly is the fact that the research and reproduction of pharmaceutical products and eventually their patient evaluation has become momentarily expensive. To boost the sale of regularly and heavily advertised products, not only do highly paid medical representatives present their sales pitch, but doctors are also enticed into promoting the drugs by the perks offered. Patients continue to use them because they are not cured. They are not supposed to be cured. They are only treated. This is the ideal way that commercialism in medicine can thrive. This is not the only shameful loose end in medicine. Techniques-oriented advancements in medicine are made possible as a result of gadgets, production. This too adds to the cost of medicine. Teaching hospitals and research institutions depend heavily on funding from the industrial side of the healthcare system. Thus, research in medicine has traditionally been directed according to the wishes of healthcare industrials who release funds for their own profit-generating projects. Now comes a moment of great rejoicing. It has been discovered that the human body possesses a variety of sophisticated indication when it runs short of water. Emergency indicators of dehydration and thirst. The body has many more than the one dry mouth indicator of water shortage. Equally obvious, the greatest tragedy in medical history is the fact that medical professionals have not understood the human body's variety of calls for water. They have traditionally resort to using chemicals and procedures to deal with chronic dehydration of the body. A monumental mistake, but a blatant fact. And my idea with this really fast is that I believe that people do understand the high quality of water. Why is it that in our cities, in our towns, even now we realize that in our bottled waters that there is chemicals inside it because they know that we drink water because that's what humans do. This is who we are. We are made out of 75-80% of water. So, on to the next. The unkindness cut of all this the way, the mainstream medical community still prefers to adhere to business as usual and ignores the good news. Fundamentally, this basic ignorance of the manifestation of the water needs of the human body is the primary reason for the high cost of health care in our society. Without a hope of improvement in the way it is presented, designed, a very bad design that only serves its operators and not the health care needing public. The National Institute of Health, NIH, the most advanced center of medical research in the world, has failed society even more miserably. Firstly, why has it not studied the medicinal effects of water? Why has it not separated the possible positive impact of water taking to swallow a pill from the medication itself? Why has it not studied what happens to a person who does not regularly drink water? These are their initial mistakes. Why do you think the NIH converted these mistakes into a sting operation? Again, as we read, as I was talking to you at the beginning, our pharmaceuticals and doctors, nurses, healthcare professionals, how else are they going to make money if we start curing a lot of people's diseases and dehydration issues by giving them water? We can't charge water, $1,000 for a glass of water. Therefore, they make medications to say they cure diseases. But yet, why is it that the rest of your life you end up taking the same medication? Doesn't make any sense. Why medicine does not cure disease? Medical professionals of today do not understand the vital roles of water in the human body. Medications are palliatives. They are not designed to cure the degenerative diseases of the human body. We will discuss the role of water in the body and how a brief understanding of this topic can transform the health needs of our society. We will learn how preventive medicine can become the main approach to healthcare in the society. The discussions that follow, the hero is water. We will look at every explanation with the view of the water is the primary substance and the leading agent in the routine events that take place in the human body. With the primary role of water in mind, we will look at some disease conditions, the missing role of water in physiological situations that will eventually become disease conditions will be discussed. And before I go on, my accent is kind of interesting sometimes, so I hope that you guys bear with me. In the diseases that will be discussed, a possible initial role of water metabolism disturbance will need to be excluded before we assume these conditions to have been caused through other processes. This is the true meaning of a preventive approach to healthcare. We should first exclude the simpler causes for disease emergence in the body and then think of more complicated. The simple truth is that dehydration can cause disease. Everyone knows that water is good for the body. They seem not to know how essential it is to one's well-being. They do not know what happens to the body if it does not receive its daily water. You will have a clear understanding of this issue. Before I move on with again, a lot of society, what do we do nowadays? We have pop, otherwise known soda. We have juices that are 1% juice. We have carbonated water, which, by the way, we will discuss that later, why carbonated water is not good for the body. We have coffee, tea, everything that we can find to drink, Gatorade, such and such, energizing drinks. But when it comes to water, people say, well, there's some water in it. But does that actually help our bodies to get the nutrition that it needs? The solution for prevention and treatment of dehydration produces diseases in water intake on a regular basis. We will discuss why, in a majority of cases, the conditions that will be mentioned are to be viewed as dehydration-produced disorders. If by the simple intake of an added amount of water every day you can get better, you will not need to worry. You should seek professional help if the adjustment to dietary needs of your body does not help and a medical problem continues to trouble you. What is offered is the needed knowledge for disease prevention and cure of dehydration diseases. When the relationship of chronic dehydration and disease emerge has become clear to the listener, information will be provided on the needed adjustment to daily water intake and the complementary diet to prevention dehydration diseases or even cure them if a totally irreversible situation has not developed. The basics. When the human body developed from the species that were given life in water, the same dependence on the life-giving properties of water were inherited. The role of water itself in the body of living species, mankind included, has not changed since the first creation of life, from the salt water and its subsequent adaptation to fresh water. And I would like to read to you something from the Bible, talking about what we just talked about, the creation of mankind. So I am going to go into Genesis, the very first verse. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Ding, ding, ding. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. And God said, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that there above the expanse, and it was so. And God called the expanse heaven, and there was evening and there was morning in the second day. And God said, "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into the one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good. Now, I'm going to get one more book, so be patient with me. The Bible that I was reading, this one is the English Standard Version. I don't necessarily recommend it. The King James is usually what I stick by. Now, what I have here is the Holy Bible, the King James Study Version of the Bible. And so we're going to go back here in Genesis, and we can go a deeper depth with understanding water, okay? Okay. So we're going to start over with the same thing. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And this is the study version, so I'll read the study version so we can go into deep depth what we're reading with the verses. Creation marks the absolute beginning of the temporal and material world. The traditional Jewish and Christian belief is that Genesis 1:1 declares that God created the original heaven and earth from nothing, and that verse 2 clarifies, which I guess I should read 2 so we understand it better. And the earth was without form and void, and the darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. All right, now we can go back to this. And the verse 2 clarifies, and without any life. The rest of the chapter then explains the process of creation in detail. There is no evidence in the Hebrew text for long ages of evolutionary development or a gap of time between verse 1 and verse 2. God, Elohim, this form of the divine name occurs 257,000 times in the Old Testament. The plural ending im indicates a plural of majesty and takes a singular verb. Creation, bara. This verb is used exclusively with God as its subject. It refers to the instantaneous and miraculous act of God by which he brought the universe in existence. Thus, the Genesis amount of creation refutes atheism, pantheism, polytheism, and evolution. 1:2. Without form and void. Informed and infilled describes the condition of earth after the initial act of creation. It does not describe a chaotic condition as a result of judgment. Thus was is corrected and should not be translated become. How the earth became formed and filled is described in verses 3:31. Darkness is not always a symbol of evil. Here it simply refers to the absence of light. Deep refers to the waters covering the earth, not some primitive cosmogony. The Spirit of God is a clear reference to the creative activity of the Holy Spirit. John 1:3 indicates that Christ actually created all things for the Father. Thus, all three persons of the Trinity are active in the creation. This undoubtedly accounts for the plural pronouns us and our in verse 26, which takes singular verbs in expressing the Trinity of God. Verse 3 of Genesis 1. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And down here it says, and God said, this is the first of a highly structured series of succinct and formulaic sentences expressing the creative commands of God. Thus, creation is accomplished by his words. B. A summary word of accomplishment, and it was so, descriptive word of accomplishment. The earth brought forth a descriptive blessing, God blessed, an evaluative approval, it was good, and a concluding temporal framework numbering each day. Verse 4. And God saw the light, and it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. So, number 4. Not the sun, which was created on the fourth day, but some fixed light source outside of the earth. The earth passed through a day and night cycle in reference to the light. The good. The word contains less an authentic judgment than a designated of purpose and correspondence to God's will, indicating the moral goodness of the creation. Verse 5. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. This act demonstrates his sovereign dominion over his creation. In the Semitic world, the naming of something or someone was the token of lordship. Reuben changed his name of the cities of the Amorites after he had conquered them. Numbers 32:36. Likewise, Pharaoh Necho changed Eliakim's name to Jehoiakim after he defeated the Judean king. 2 Kings 23:34. Day. Apart from the use of the word day in verses 5, 8, 13, and 19, 23, and 31, where it describes the day of creation, it is used in at least 4 ways in the first 2 chapters of Genesis. 1. The 12-hour period of daylight as opposed to the night. A solar day of 24 hours. 3. The period of light that began with the creation of light on the first day. And number 6, this is the verse 6. And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. Firmament is an expanse between the waters suspended by God in vapor form over the earth. Most likely, approximately half of the waters upon the earth were supernaturally elevated above the atmosphere. Perhaps in the form of an invisible vapor canopy, this would have trapped the earth's heat with a greenhouse effect and would have provided a formerly tropical climate everywhere until it collapsed from the earth during the universal rainfall at the time of the Great Flood. This might explain the longevity described in Genesis 5, in addition to providing a water source for the flood of chapters 6 and 9. Verse 8. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. Third day, seas, land, and vegetation. And God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto the place, and let the dry land appear, and it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called the seas, and God saw that it was good. And God said, let the earth bring forth grass and herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth, and it was so. And in here in 11, contrary to the modern evolutionist who insists that all plants and animals developed over hundreds of millions of years from a single speck of life in the ocean, and the theistic evolutionists who claim the Bible allows for such process by the use of such phrases as let the earth bring forth, Genesis not only dates the creation of marine life, verses 20, as being after the creation of plants and fruit trees, but also reveals the fruit trees were created already bearing fruit, whose seed in itself. God produced a functioning and mature creation. Plants were created fully grown as mature and adult organisms, with a superficial appearance of age. Similarly, Adam and Eve were created as adults. The phrase after his or their kind is repeated 10 times in the chapter and demands that adults of each kind would have to be created supernaturally to begin this life circle. Moses uses the word kind 30 out of the 31 times it appears in the Old Testament. The word may not require the separate creation of each species by God, but it does require at the least the separate creation of families within order. Verses 12. And the earth brought forth grass and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit whose seed was in itself after his kind, and God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the third day. And God said, let there be light in the firmament of the heaven to divide the light from the night. And let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. And what's really interesting about the stars, and I should do some more research before I bring this up, but because I'm going to be on here more often, I was researching about some stars. Now, if a lot of you know, you've read a lot about NASA and stuff, that the planets as well as stars create their own song, which I would say that would mean that they're praising God through their own way, which is interesting enough that God created things to already praise him. Now, I've also researched that the stars might actually be a type of form of water. And certain scientists have been testing these. Now, if you, for instance, get some water and you put it on a beat and you're playing certain types of beats on it, you'll notice that the water will start doing geometrical shapes, depending on what kind of sound you're throwing for it. So that's interesting. We will still need to keep researching. It's not in the Bible, so I can't necessarily tell you that the stars are made of water for a fact. All right, let's see where we were at. And God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night, the sun and the moon. And he made the stars also. Down in here it says, and God made 2 great lights. Refers to the sun and moon. They did not appear different verb and stem as the dry land did in verse 9, but were actually made at this time. God makes it clear that he, not the sun, is the earth's creator, and that God is not dependent upon the sun either for the earth's material substance or for the sustaining life. From the standpoint of astronomy, the sun and the moon are obviously not the 2 great lights of the universe. This is the language of appearance as seen from man's viewpoint. Genesis is written in geocentric rather than heliocentric terms. Signs in verse 14 might refer to unusual sights in the heavens, such as eclipses of the sun, rather than suggested that God designed the celestial bodies to determine the destinies of individual men, as modern astrologers proclaim. 2 Kings 23:12, Jeremiah 19:13, Zephaniah 1:5, where God condemns such practice, which we see it in our spirituality and a lot of the churches now today as well, unfortunately. And God set them in the firmament and the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the 4th day. And God said, let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. Okay, down here it says, let the waters bring forth is better translated and understood as let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, so as not to misleadingly suggest that the waters themselves produce marine life. This text also implies that aquatic life and fowl appeared simultaneously, denying the evolutionary subsequence of reptiles before birds. And God created great whales, and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And God saw that it was good. Great whales is not the best translation. Better is the term great sea creatures to include the great fish as well as whales. Taninium is used elsewhere to describe the serpent. Exodus 7, 9, 10, and 12. And the dragon, Psalms 148, verses 7, is 51. It's Isaiah 51, verses 9, and Ezekiel 29, 3. There is no evidence whatsoever, either from paleontology or genetics, that whales or great sea monsters could have developed from land animals. The theory of evolution claims that the first animal in the oceans were microscopic, single-celled creatures, and that whales, sea cows, had to evolve from four-legged land mammals, which in turn evolved from cold-blooded marine creatures. Thus, they would have evolved. No. And this is verse 22. And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let fowl multiply in the earth. And the evening and the morning were the fifth day. And God said, let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing and beast of the earth after his kind, and it was so. Down here it says, living creatures is the same Hebrew expression used for man in 2 verse 7, translated living soul. Verse 25, and God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let them have domination over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. And God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. A male and female created he them. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. And then on here, it says, in the contrast to animals in verses 20 and 24, where God said, let the waters bring forth and let the earth bring forth, he now says, let us make men in our own image after our likeness. All others reproduce after their kind, but man is the only one made in the image of God and reproducing in that image. The terms image and likeness are used synonymously and refer primarily to man's spiritual resemblance, rationally and morally, to his maker. God placed a great chasm between man and the beast, for only man has the capacity for eternal life, fellowship, moral discernment, self-consciousness, speech, and worship, even after the fall of man. Retains this image of God. Though it has been marred, the pronoun us retains this, is most likely a majestic plural from the standpoint of Hebrew grammar and syntax. Man is used in a generic sense, which is amplified by the phrase male and female. Even though Eve's physical formation is not detailed until 2:18 through 24, these words are not the usual Hebrew words for man and woman, which the man would be ish and woman would be isha. The words used here specifically distinguish the sexes, female and male. Sex unique relationship was to develop, namely holy marriage. Demeaning is not the content, but the consequence of the divine image. Hebrews 2:7 through 8:10 and James 3:7. And God blessed them. To bless is not only to bestow a gift, but also to assign a function. Replenish is better translated fill the earth, indicating their first time. It cannot be used in support of the refashioning of an already judged earth, but it always means to fill something in the first time. Alright, so we're going to read verse 29. And God said, Behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in the which is the fruit of the tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat. And to, interesting. Why don't they say that the animals that he had created is for meat? Interesting, or is it interesting? And to every beast, now we're getting to it, of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat. And it was so. But on here, it doesn't say, I give you a lion for meat. It doesn't say that I give you a turkey for meat. No, it says green herb for meat. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. Now, you might be asking why I started reading the chapter from the beginning, and I'm moving on, and I finished the whole chapter of number 1. Because if I'm supposed to help you to understand the Bible, and to understand the verses to get into it, I can't read you to the chapter, or I can't read you one verse and say, now you understand it. Why don't you understand it? Hello? Why don't you understand it? Because how are you supposed to understand if you don't read it from the beginning to understand the points following to this? So, with that, I wanted to stop there because then it goes on, but it doesn't explain too far other than, let me read you the chapter of the part, okay? Let's see. All right. And the Lord caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam. This is chapter 2, verses 21, starting off from there. And he slept, and he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh instead thereof. And the rib which the Lord God had taken from man made he woman, and he brought her unto the man. And Adam said, There is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. So we'll start there with that. There were so many points about dealing with water that if you're going to tell me that you don't understand why water is healthy, well, my friend, I think you must be blind. But luckily, I know all of you who are watching me are very intelligent individuals, and even the ones who don't understand it just yet, please read the Bible for yourself. Don't let me speech these words for you, and then you just listen without understanding for yourself why what I'm telling you is very serious and very real. And I will explain to you that this Bible, the study Bible that I have, is an Ellen G. White study Bible. She was one of the prophets of God. You can also study her as well. When life on land became an objective for advancement beyond the immediate vicinity of water supply, even beyond amphibian life, the stressful adventure beyond the known boundaries, a gradually refined body water preservation system had to be created for further species development. This process of temporary adaptation to transient dehydration also became inherited as well-established mechanism in the human body, and it is now the infrastructure to all operative system within the body of modern humans. For the earlier water-dwelling species, adventure beyond their known boundaries would constitute great stress because they would dry up. This stress would establish a dominant physiology for crisis management of water. In the now stressed humans, exactly the same translation of the physiology of crisis management of water becomes established. The process primarily involves a strict rationing of the water reserves of the body. It is assumed that water supplies for the immediate needs of the body will be limited. Management of the available reserves of water in the body becomes the responsibility of a complex system. This complex multi-level water rationing and distribution process remains in operation until the body receives unmistakable signals that it has gained access to adequate water supply. Since every function of the body is monitored and pegged to the flow of water, water management is the only way of making sure that adequate amounts of water and its transported nutrients first reach the more vital organs that will have to confront and deal with any new stress. This mechanism becomes more and more established for survival against natural enemies and predators. It is ultimate operative system for survival in fight or flight situations. It is still the operative mechanisms in the competitive environment of the modern life in the society. We will stop there for today, but understand the reasons why we get stress in our life is because partly has to do with not enough water. Again, this is the Avalonia's Improvement, and you have a great night.